and hopefully it'll be a good resource for people who couldn't make it today. If you have any questions, please use the chat to start putting your thoughts in so that when we get to the end of the presentation, we can address any questions you might have and maybe even return. So if you notice a certain slide or something and you want to ask a question about it, just let us know. It is then that wonderful moment to say welcome to the 2024 Native Plant Sale. This is the second Zoom we're doing. And this covers a little bit more just general ways that we can use these plants in our gardens. And anybody who has anything they want to add at the end too, please. Everybody's knowledge is of value in our world here. And we are very grateful for all the people who've been working with native plants in our region. And there's a lot of good wisdom out there. So how can they work in your garden? So start keeping the notes and ask the questions at the end, because we're here for you too. So we can create small prairie gardens that fill a corner of a yard. They can manage it as a wet area or simply create habitat. Just start removing your grass a little at a time until maybe you don't have as much and there's more room for the pollinators. And that's what we're all seeking to do here, is just create more habitat so that we can have a more living landscape for all of us. Here's one example of the way you can use some of our native plants in your garden. And you could do something like this in a smaller scale. This is a larger scale garden at this point, but it has the Jacob's ladder here at the edge. So you can use that as a smaller side of the border. This is actually a brome sedge, but you could use the prairie drop seed, which would work just as effectively. And then you can plant within this matrix grid the blue lobelia. You could use some of the rudbeckia or black-eyed Susan. There are many of the medium-sized plants that you could plant in your little grid like this. And you could do that in a 5-square-foot garden and have like 4 prairie drop seeds and then add other plants in between. So that's a fun way that you can start to play with these plants. Another thing you can do when you're paying attention to putting your plants together is you can think of the ones, look at in each plant, we always have a description of the size it can grow to and the kinds of soils that they appreciate. So take a good look at that too when you're making your orders. Here we have a picture that has the cephalanthus, which is the button bush. It's on the edge of a little waterier area. It can also do okay in medium soils. Here we have the rusty patch bumblebee, who is one of the insect pollinators that is very much on the threatened list, but has an established population in our region. So we're trying to provide also these rusty patch bumblebee related plants. And you can see that in the website with an RPBB beside it, the rusty patch bumblebee name beside it indicates that that's one thing you can do. And this tends to grow a little taller. So if you plant it amongst other plants that are a little stockier and grow around it, it can actually support it too, so it doesn't flop so much. So that's another thing to remember. All right, one thing that everybody, whoa, back we go. Whoa. Okay. One thing that everybody asked for this year was, can we please have more shade-related plants? Because so many people in our region have at least 2 or 3 larger shade trees or even some evergreens around the yard. So they have more of a savanna-like place or closer to almost a woodland feel in parts of their garden. So to help fill in these spots, we ordered more quantities of some of these plants, and then we added new. For instance, we have the tiarella here, which is the foam flower, which is very lovely. That's a late spring bloomer. Then we have the sedum, which is also a wonderful ground cover. And interestingly, our woodland stone crop really has evolved in more of a woodland savanna-like situation, although it will take sun. So it's just really nice to know that this is one that will have that wonderful flower for the pollinators when they first start out. And it grows nicely together with sedges, which do well in shadier areas as well. And we have, I think, the rosy sedge, and we'll see that in one of our other sheets. We got rosy sedge, James sedge, and also this wonderful plantain sedge, which does really well. And we got more of those this year. It's a lovely strappy plant, and it works very nicely in shade gardens. Another great one for the edge and part sun, and even can take a little more sun if it's got a little moisture, is this dwarf crested iris, which has that lovely bloom right at the time, sort of like right after you come out of spring going into summer. That I call it like the iris time. It's about a 2 or 3 week period when there's irises everywhere, and you just appreciate that there's this little window of time. And then when it's not blooming, it has a lovely strappy leaf, so it has a beautiful sort of along the edge, low to the ground feeling. So the front of the border, it works very nicely. We also have, if you have a little deeper woodland area, this really fun Jack in the Pulpit. I remember as a child, I just used to love to go look and peek in and see the little stamen in there, and they say, "Whoa, there, where's Jack? Is he in there? He's in the pulpit." And then they do create berries. There are berries you don't want to encourage your children to eat, but that's a good thing to pay attention to. And once they're a certain age, it's really wonderful when you learn what works, what doesn't work. We're part of nature, and when we get to know nature better, it serves everybody. That's a wonderful new woodland uh, um, addition to our gardens this year. We also have the American bellflower, the lesser celandine poppy. I mean, sorry, not lesser celandine, the celandine poppy, styloform. This is a really lovely shade plant, and it will start to fill in and populate over time. You do want to then edit it sometimes. Also with the woodland sunflower, it's a wonderful plant. This is one of our plants which we indicate as a keystone species. Keystone species are really the rock of all ecosystems, and these serve many different pollinators. And the lovely thing about this woodland sunflower is it has that sunflower and it blooms in shadier areas. It does like to colonize. So if you put one plant in, over a few years, you're going to have a 3 square foot area that'll have this sunflower in it. So put it in a place that you want to have it sort of populate and fill in. You can also edit around the edges to keep things where you want. So the thing that to recognize always with native gardens is just like any other garden, it's a garden that you want to tend. So you're going to want to pay attention, like, do I want it to grow out and fill in more, or do I want to manage it a little bit? So pay attention. Wild geranium is a wonderful plant. It does tend to, it has that wonderful spring bloom and is very lovely. And it can kind of wilt back a little bit when things get hotter. And you can always do a little shear to it if you want it to just have the foliage beef up a little bit. Or if you don't, you can just allow it to be as it is and have the other plants that grow in and around it, and you'll never know the difference. So it's all a matter of how do we want to treat the native garden that we have. Of course, minimum minimum taking care of things is always useful for everybody. It lets the insects do their things and others. Then we have interestingly, wild blue indigo is more, it likes part sun as well as with the blue gentian. So these are sort of semi-shade garden plants, these two here, whereas the rest, and this is a semi-shade too, whereas the American spikenard will take a deep shade. The rosy sedge doesn't like any more than the part shade. You can't put it in part sun. Because part sun, when you start thinking about part shade and part sun, part shade is like when you get the morning sun and then it's shade for the rest of the day. Part sun is more like you get the morning shade and then there's the hotter sun at the end of the day. So that's a really thing to pay attention to when you're looking at these plants. Some are more delicate and others are a little more vigorous growers. The blue stem goldenrod is a part shade, part sun. And then the big leafed asters are wonderful. And the columbine is one of those wonderful plants that also makes hummingbirds happy. So if you're looking to get your yard populated with a hummingbird, you can use the wild columbine for that early hello. Now, every once in a while, I just like to remind people that the one thing that's wonderful about all these plants is that they can you can use them to help manage rainwater. And one of the great ways that you can do that is to make a little rain swale in a parkway or even in your yard if the concrete is tipping, because of tree roots or something towards your yard. You can always make a little divot garden where the water can fall into it during the frost freeze cycles, so the ice goes away and the plants can help manage that. Here's a beautiful example of one of these little parkway hedges, gardens that you can do. You just make it go downhill towards the back of the bed, and it helps to manage the water. In this one, we're using the low-growing James sedge. There was also planted in here, in this area right here. This was the oak sedge, and the oak sedge will fill in more. You can see how it doesn't keep that clump form. It gets a little bit more like filling in. So it can be a good ground cover, and it even can be used as a substitute for grass in parkways and shady areas. So it'll really, after 2 or 3 years, it'll fill in like it did fill in this whole space. This all became that sedge, the oak sedge. Yeah, so this is a great way to help solve that really simple problem and make everybody appreciative. So another plant that we had in those ground covers page on the website is this is our one ephemeral that we have now this year, the dodecodon, which is a shooting star, and it can take anywhere from part shade to full sun, and it's a great plant. It's so beautiful when these flowers come up, and you can see it does well with Jacob's ladder. You can also plant it in with some geranium in the background. This is a future of great blue lobelia. So it's a plant that comes in later in the season and can come up and kind of fill in the space when this one dies back. So that's another thing you can keep in consideration. Also, you can plant wild strawberry, which is a great green mulch. Some people, I find it just it's a good functioning plant as that green mulch. You do have to make sure it doesn't end up taking out areas. But I've never had it happen so far in several gardens that I'm working with. So I don't think it's problematic. And it's beautiful because you can actually eat the little strawberries, and it provides food for nature, for our creature buddies too. Okay, this is another wonderful little vignette in a way that you can use some of our native plants that we're selling here on the sale now. Although this plant is not, oh, sorry. This is the indigo. Oh, let's see, wait a second, I apologize. Here we go. I have to move something here. Okay. All right, I apologize. Here's prairie drop seed. We have Veronicastrum popping up here, which we also have for sale. Here in the background, we have the Echinacea pallida that's also in our palette these days, and so is the Coreopsis. So this is a beautiful, very designed kind of feel for a native garden. It doesn't have to look really crazy and wild all the time. You can actually give it some structure. And this is our lead plant, which this takes a few years to establish. You have to make sure the rabbits aren't going to be hitting it until it gets to a certain level, and then it'll do fine. But you can see how beautiful it is once established. It really takes on a life of its own, and its shape and form just plays really well with the prairie drop seed as well. All right, so we were talking earlier about just the ground cover. So here's the prairie drop seed. This is one of my favorite that came in this year. It's also a new one. Oh, sorry. Is the purple lovegrass. If you have sandy soils, this is a wonderful little grass to put in your garden. It doesn't get much taller than 1.5 feet, 2 feet, and it has that beautiful spray at the end of the summer. So in August into the fall. And when it's not like this, it has a strappy leaf and a good placeholder. It really sits in the garden nicely. So this is a lovely plant, and it can be really fun to grow this together with some other grasses as well, so that you get blooms at different times. The prairie drop seed will bloom at the end of it blooms about the same time as the purple love grass. And then we have the little blue stem, which looks nice in the gardens. We have a wild petunia, which goes great at the edges. It will seed out and make a lot of its presence known if you don't manage it in some places, like if it's really happy. In sandy soils, which a lot of us do have here on the in Evanston, on that ridge that kind of knocks the edge of the old lake bed, the sandy soils, it doesn't seem to spread so much. It does that more in clay soils. Then the Jacob's ladder is a wonderful standard for any garden, as we were talking about earlier. The Virginia waterleaf will do really nicely in a shady, wetter, or even just moister sort of woodland area, and does a great job of covering the ground. So if you want a ground covery area, and the pollinators just love this plant. It's blooming like the end of May into June. This is prairie alum, which is the Heuchera richardsonii. I love this plant. I call it sort of the petticoat of the garden, and you can stick it again at the edges of the plant, or you can use it as a sort of green mulch between things a little bit too, to fill in. So if you have little holes in the garden, and it has a small, delicate yellow flower that the small-tongued bees love, then who doesn't love prairie smoke? It's a great plant for the edges. Again, we have the wild strawberry available, and field pussy toes, wonderful plant This really is a flat, low-lying ground cover and has a really fun bloom when it comes, and it's a host plant for one of our local butterflies here. And then this year, we also got this silky aster, which grows a little shorter than a lot of asters. And it has a lovely kind of pinkish hue to it. It doesn't get taller than 2 feet. So this is a really nice one to put into your garden if you want to not have a really tall garden. So here we have a configuration using some of the plants that we have on sale. Here we have the mountain mint. Here we have the lead plant. This one's just starting to grow in. The rabbits kind of hit it that year. We have the swamp milkweed. This is a wonderful plant. This is actually one of the plants that the monarchs really prefer to lay eggs on. So if you want to have a good egg laying milkweed, this is a great one. And it takes anything to part, it goes to part shade and wet gardens as well as a more regular garden. But you can see right off the downspout here, these plants are just really having a good time. Then we also have the Queen of the Prairie here growing up nicely. So there's just really fun ways, and we have right here a great blue lobelia. No, that's still Queen of the Prairie. But anyways, so it's just, and here's a Jacob's ladder. It's gone by, and it just still has that nice texture in the bed. All right, so here we have another example of ways that plants from the plant sale go well in your garden. You can see here's the Joe Pye weed, and this is already going into late, now we're hitting into probably early September. And we have the blue lobelia still blooming. We've got a little bit of that rudbeckia, the black-eyed Susan. We have that wonderful blue sort of tinge to the baptisia, the wild blue indigo, which is a really wonderful form in the garden. And the best part about this plant is, like, if you have a place where you want to have something that's sort of like a boxwood, but you don't care if it has the winter color, you can actually shear these a little bit after they've gone to seed. This is the seed head, which is a really fun form too. And you could, earlier in the season, right here, we had a big patch of the orange butterfly weed, which has now gone dormant and had some seed heads in here, I think. And then the Calaroe, which we also have for sale, really looks nice with that. I don't think I have that slide in here today, but all of these plants can be played with together, you know. The Culver root too was in the back here of this garden. So you just use the taller plants more in the back of the garden or sort of in the central aspect of the garden, and then just choose the shorter plants for those places closer to your walkways and places you want to sit. So this is another one of our newbies this year, the blue skullcap. It does tend to fill in spaces. So it is in the mint family, and this is a little more vigorous grower than a lot of other ones. But if you have a space and you just want it to be really filled with this beautiful color, I have this in my backyard, and I was talking earlier about hummingbirds. Well, hummingbirds love this plant. They love the cardinal flower as well. And it's just a delight to have this plant come up and do its thing. It's probably all of August into September. And you can edit it. which I've also done that in some of the beds, and then I've let it just go wild in some of the other ones. See, we also have blue aster, which this is a taller aster. So again, you're going to want to have some of these more structural plants sort of around them to kind of keep them from flopping too much. Another beautiful thing about tall asters, 4th of July, if you don't want it to get that tall, this blue aster, and there's another aster that we have for sale as well, which is the aster oblongifolium, otherwise known as the aromatic aster. And it has a propensity to kind of sprawl sometimes, whereas this blue aster will get really tall and flop. If you want those two things not to happen, right before the 4th of July, you just cut them back by 1/3. And the plants will still bloom in a timely fashion, and they will keep their shape, and you will be happy. And it's such an easy, minor thing to do, and it works like a dream. So we also have this liatris, which you can put a little bit of structural support to it, like a peony cage, or you can use a wood stake if you want to keep it from flopping. Otherwise, you can let it be wild. But if you want to keep it more as a garden and have people understand that you're gardening, that's something you can do. This is that Veronicastrum, the Culver's root that I was telling you about earlier. That is just a lovely sort of 4th of July, a little after 4th of July. It's just like a little fireworks that can come up from the center of the garden or at the back of the border when you have a little bit of sun. It's a great plant. One second. All right, so here's a way that you can put these plants together, right? You can disregard the sneezeweed. That's not for sale this year, but you could make a nice border in just an average part of your garden using the blue smooth aster to in the mid front of the garden. At the back of the border, you'd have your Joe Pye weed because they get really big and beefy. They will also, the Joe Pye weeds, so you know, they will colonize. So they're one that you have to edit occasionally if you don't want them to be taking over the whole garden. And then you can also have the turtle head in the middle, mid back. Then to have like that structural holding that we were talking about, this wonderful Amsonia that we're selling, the Amsonia tabernae montana, the Eastern Blue Star. It has a nice spring flower and it has a shrub-like sensibility to it. So you can use that like right in the front of the border in front of these larger, taller ones, and it gives it structure. But look at the size that it likes to grow. They like to grow to about 3 feet wide. So you want to give the plants a little bit of space that you want to plant around them, knowing that it takes about 2 or 3 years before you have the structure of the garden really set. So there may be some floppy times, but be patient. Then at the front of the border, the regular purple coneflower, the purpurea, tends to have more structure to it. So you can put that closer to the front of the border as well. And you can put mid back of the border and the front of the border. The blue lobelia is also a structural sort of plant. It doesn't flop very much at all. So here's a good example of a blue indigo with blue lobelia. So what's fun about thinking about plants this way is in the spring, you're going to have a purpley blue flower like that. And then if you interplant a plant like blue lobelia that has that purpley blue flower later in the season, it still gives you, it's almost like it blooms twice. So it's just fun to think of plants and the way that the gardens go together that way. And here we have, this is the penstemon. This is the seed head left on. The one thing to know about the beard tongue, the penstemons that we have, is they are a very valuable plant for the pollinator community because they bloom in this portion of the year that's right between spring and high summer. So they're like one of these plants that have great pollinator value. And you'll also see the hummingbirds coming to these as well. So this is one of those plants that you want to love, putting at least 3 of these together. You want to try and build up a nice bank that the pollinators can go into and really collect up some good pollen. Here we have also the mulberry is growing in the garden. It's still immature, but they can get pretty beefy and they do like to sucker out. So if you're going to plant mulberries, you can put a little guard in the ground like this deep to kind of keep them from spreading, or just know that you're going to be managing them, or you allow them to grow as a thicket. So there's also places in your garden where you might say, okay, I'm going to have a mulberry thicket there and I don't care. It's just going to fill in and it'll have its suckers that'll come up and do their thing. This is wonderful plant because you can eat the berries. Elderberry juice is good. Who hasn't heard of elderberry wine? A lot of these natives do provide food source for us as well as nature. Here we have also, believe it or not, this is the little blue gentians. They were just, I think, just about to bloom or just past blooming. And here we have the prairie drop seed with its seed head. It has that really delicate, lovely seed head on it. Some people think it smells sort of like popcorn. It definitely has an aroma. So there's here it is too with its seed heads coming up at the end of the season. So, and this is the bottle gentian. So putting the bottle gentian sort of at the edge so you can enjoy it when it comes up to bloom is also really nice. I often plant it near the walkways because there's like a little surprise blue ball of flower. And the thing that's interesting about the gentian is that it does have this tendency that it needs to have the bumblers to open up that flower head. Although there are some tricky pollinators, bees that will go in and chew at the bottom and come in through the side. So it's one of those interesting prairie plants that we can enjoy. So here you can see, if you have a shady area with a maple tree, this is all rosy sedge. And this rosy sedge actually grows in a rain garden. The rainwater comes from the downspout and then pops up in a pop-up here. And it just manages the water really well. The one thing about the rosy sedge is if you want to use it in a more formal way, there is going to be a floppy period. This is right at springtime. And when things start to get kind of hot, it can kind of lay down for a while. But then when it gets cool again, it'll sort of pop up. This is also that other plantain sedge that we have in the gardens, which we have available, and you can see it almost has that sense of a hosta. So you can plant that in a garden, and it has, if you want to substitute a native for that look, there you go. You got the plantain sedge. So here was the beard tongue we were talking about earlier. So it has that lovely sort of bell flower on the top. And here's another series of things that you could put together to make for a nice garden. I also personally love the harebells, the campanula. It's a little bit of a weedy looking plant, but the flowers just keep coming and coming. And if you grow like some sedges in around them and such, it's just a delight. You just have to figure out how to play with these plants, and they'll really delight you. So you've heard me talk a little bit about green layer, using green mulch to layer in part shade. You can do that with these different kinds of sedges. You can also use that strawberry as we were talking about earlier. And then if you want a bushy, shrubby kind of feel, the spikenard, the Aurelia racemosa, is a really cool plant for a nice shady area. It is a perennial and it dies back in the winter. But boy, if you have like a big hole in a shady section that would take it like a 3-foot wide to 4-foot wide shrub feeling plant, this one will really do the trick in a lovely way. And it has the berries, which the birds love. It's just it's a great performer. And we were talking a little bit about keystones earlier. We know that the asters are keystones, but also the goldenrods are, and this blue stem goldenrod is probably the best behaved goldenrod you could ever put in a garden. So it's not going to get too crazy. It brings in some nice bright color into your shady garden, and it feeds the pollinators at the end of the season, just like you want them to. Okay, this is another one of our tree shrubs that we have, and it's not in its, this is in its more dormant form, but it is actually blooming. You can see these are all blooms. This plant had a beautiful shape, and we were really surprised as a mature tree, like small tree shrub. It got hit by the rabbits after 4 years, and we were just really surprised. So now we just rabbit caged this witch hazel in the winter to make sure that they don't eat the bark, because they just were nibbling away at the bark, and they killed off a whole part of it. This was a perfectly formed shrub, but nature's like that, and yeah, so you just work with it. So it offers pollen and nectar for up to 4 weeks. And this was blooming already in February this year, people. That's crazy. I've seen it do it once before in an El Nino year that early. But it does a great job of being available for those early emerging small native bees, the honeybees and the gnats, which are really good for the birds. In this particular yard, there's actually a mother wren, who comes in to raise her crew here, and it's lots of fun. And that's one of the foods they would be eating. The flowers are spicy and sweet, so they offer this wonderful smell and that wonderful feeling of hope for the spring. Another one that we have that's pretty good, has a nice shrub, is this lovely Rosa blanda. It has a little less prickers on it than a lot of roses, especially on new growth, although the stems will get a little more prickers on them. But it's one of those other plants that are just really essential for a really healthy ecosystem. So if you have a place where you could put a nice wild rose, I highly recommend this plant. It's part shade, part sun. It can take it more than other roses, and it can fill in nice spots in your garden that are just sort of corners that need a little something. Like many of the native roses, it doesn't bloom all the time. But one of the things I love about seasonal blooms in all of these plants is it keeps us recognizing that life moves on and changes and shifts, and it's not always staying the same and static. And so it's so beautiful to just recognize, okay, now it's iris time, now it's rose time, now, and it's just, I don't know, it just makes me happy, can I say, my happy place. For dry shade, in part sun, here's 3 really lovely selections we have available for you guys. One is this Eurobia, the big leaf aster. It does a great job of filling in and creating a ground cover in a shady area, if you'd like, that's dry. It doesn't like it to get wet too much, but it does a brilliant job of what you call pupping out. So you'll see a little baby here and there. It's also very manageable. So if you do want to edit it, you can, but it has this lovely white aster flower, and this is more in August. So this is one of the earlier blooming asters that we have available. And then in our shrubs, for the lower growing shrubs, we have the Diarvella linacera, this bush honeysuckle, and we also have the Symphycarpus, which is not a bush honeysuckle. It has another name. Sorry about that. It's called oh God. There you go, white snowberry. Anyways, or pink snowberry. It has a little pink in it. So anyways, the things that's nice about those plants is that you can keep them more as a shrubby look, or you can allow them to get a little bit more to fill in and sucker out a little bit. It depends on how you want to manage your garden. Okay, so these are plants that'll do better in drier sites if you're concerned about that. New Jersey tea, this is a delight. If you have been up to Winnetka or Wilmette in the summer, they've planted all of their small traffic islands with this shrub, and it's so beautiful. The rabbits don't get to it. And so if you can give it a good rabbit cage, this plant will grow up and it produces such lovely structure and size. And you can actually, if you went on our garden walk last summer, they actually had mature specimens of this in the prairie out there, in the bird sanctuary that was one of our featured gardens last year, the Clark Street Beach bird beach. It was just, it's really impressive. So once these plants mature and they're in a community of other plants, they don't get devastated by the rabbits as much, which is another thing that's really interesting to see. So when we're building healthy habitats, the plants have a better opportunity to thrive. Who doesn't love a beautiful 9-bark, that wonderful fall color? There's the bark kind of strips away from itself a little like a an aspen, not an aspen, but one of the, I apologize, long day. Anyways, it has this little, the way that that goes. So we have gooseberries as well as the American currant. This is one of my personal faves. The gooseberries favor a little drier sites. The American currants can go dry to wet. You can even put those in a rain garden. Lindura, the benzoin, the spice bush, favored by many. Again, look at their maximum size when you're going to put them in, and make sure that you don't make sure you give these plants enough space to grow into, so you won't be annoyed by them when they are mature. A lot of people, the big mistake when they plant any garden is they don't pay attention to the maximum size growth for the plant. The cephalanthus, the button bush, is a big example of that as well. We've got the red twig dogwoods. They like a little more wet than dry. The wild plums are out already. Pussy willow, this is another one of those uh, keystone species plants that we can be putting in the gardens. And birds just love this black haw viburnum. The viburnum prunifolium is also resistant to the beetle. There's the viburnum leaf beetle that has been really devastating a lot of our native arrowwoods. Well, this has a waxier leaf, and for some reason they don't like them. So hallelujah for that. And this is a great bird berry shrub. So that's a great thing about it too. Also, black currants. If you get a mature group of these growing, I actually ate a few currants last year. It was really nice. And the gooseberries too. So, and then who doesn't love a serviceberry? And the serviceberries, oh my God, serviceberry muffins to die for. I make them every year now. So just for grins, you guys all know I'm obsessed with rain gardens. If you're interested in trying to build yourself one, this is a great resource. The Rain Garden Alliance, Rain Garden Calculator. And you can learn more about how to do all that stuff. But this calculator rocks. And you can see it calculates for sandy soils, silty soils, or clay soils. You can make it a deep one, like 6 inches deep. If you just remove 4 inches of your grass and you take your downspout water and run it in there, you got yourself a little rain garden. You just keep it flat and away and away from your house. It's got to be 8 to 10 feet away from your house. And it's wonderful because the plants also they take care of flooding problems when there's big rains, and they can tolerate if it's dry. But it's really wonderful to use the resource of the water and keep it here in our region and not be sending it into the stormwater systems and down in the Gulf to the Gulf of Mexico. So that's just one of my things I always have to say. And yeah, so here's another beautiful way to put all these plants together. I think next year we might have to get bee balm. I don't know, what do you guys think? That's a really neat bee balm that we don't have yet in the plant sale. It's a short-lived plant, but it likes dry soils, and it will invite itself into your garden, into different places. And the big black wasps love it, and it's just a pollinator crazy place in the summer. So yeah, maybe that's one for next year. So remember to be kind and add at least one aster and one goldenrod to any bed you plant, because that's part of the keystone world that we can be offering from our plant sale. All right, peeps, you got any questions? I'm all yours.
We have a few in the chat.
Okay.
The first one is from Emily. Says, I just moved into a house for the first time and now have a lawn. I'd like to plant native flowers that attract hummingbirds and pollinators, but have never planted anything before. Do you have any recommendations for resources for folks who are complete beginners?
There's lots of really great places. Wild Ones West, or just Wild Ones, period, has some really neat they have some so if you go to Wild Ones website, Wild Ones West, it might be called Cook Wild Ones West, but they have actually some examples of planting designs you can use. You can also hire locals, designers that do that stuff. There's quite a few people in the region that do that, and some people will give you a consultation. But yeah, basically, just start even a little at a time. You know, if you want to just start by having, let's see, I want to see if I can see people a little better. There you go. If you want to start by doing a little bit at a time and growing your garden, that's a good way to do it too. But always think about when you get a piece of grid paper, you know, and you can use your plat of survey to kind of do this. And you just make sure that if the tree's gonna be 4 feet wide, that you plant it with the center of it sitting at least 2 or 3 feet away from your foundation. So it's just, you have to start just thinking like a plant a little bit as you start into the adventure of doing these native plant gardens. And then we talked about, the hummingbirds. You can also see, I mentioned the penstemon. For every season, we have something for hummingbirds. We have in the spring, we have columbine. We have the penstemon for that midpoint. And then we've got the skullcap for midsummer into the fall. And I don't know, we don't have, another thing I would love to have is the honeysuckle vine next year. Maybe I can get our grower to do that one for next year. But yeah, oh yeah, there's another really wonderful special shrub that's good in the sandier areas that is being sold in the flowers section, but it's the Hyperchium, the St. John's wort. And that gets to be a really nice shrub size. It can be up to 3 feet wide and it has a beautiful yellow bloom at the end of the season.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, there's quite a lot more. Carl asked, do any of the wildflower or garden or ground cover plants do well in containers?
Yeah, you can totally play with these in containers. If you want them to overwinter in the container, you want to make sure you have them in a larger, maybe like 3x3, and you'd like it to be probably in that sense. Oh, you could use fiberglass so it can stay out all winter. But if you have it be 3x3, it can go through the frost freeze cycle a little more effectively as if it were in the ground. A good book I recommend too is this Pollinator Victory Garden. And they actually even have a section in it on putting plants into containers. You can put you could use a one grass. You could have like one of the little blue stems. You could add in one of the, you could put a petunia in the edge to kind of droop over the edges, a wild petunia. You could have a more stand-up straight plant like an echinacea in that same container. There's all kinds of resources if you Google online, placing plants in containers. I'm sure there's some great resources. And actually the woman who wrote this book, her name's Kim Eierman. Her website is Eco Beneficial, and she has definitely some combinations on that website as well.
And Carl also asked, would wild strawberry compete with Pachysandra, or could it complement in an adjacent space?
Oh yeah, it could complement. It's not going to in any way, it's not going to threaten Pachysandra that's established at all.
And Emily also asked, we've been thinking of planting a hedgerow as a fence. Are there native plants that you would recommend?
Oh yeah, if you have also a little room for things to grow, a great hedgerow would be to use the chokeberry along with chokeberries tend to grow a little more upright, and so you could grow them as the taller hedge near the back of the border, and then you could use some of these smaller shrubs like the honeysuckle, the bush honeysuckle, or the ribes, the different currant and the currant and the gooseberry. You could put those like as the lower part of that hedge. A great hedge is to use the 9-bark. 9-bark makes a great hedgerow. And then you can also vary it. Like it's healthier if you don't put all of one kind. It's always good if you want to put like 3 of one kind and then put another one and another one. It just sort of mixing them up a little bit too can keep the plants healthier if a disease hits, or like if some aphids get a little happy in a region. You could also put the prunifolium, the viburnum in that hedgerow, depending on how big and beefy you want to do it. So you just have to look at what the max size of the plant is when you do that. And know that plants do not mind touching each other. They've evolved together. So if you want a hedgerow, you can plant them a little closer together than their maximum growth rate would say. So they can sort of play together to make that hedgerow. Cephalanthus would be good. You just have to make sure there's more water for if you're going to use that shrub. Yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, Megan has asked, I'm really struggling with rabbits. How do you protect your natives, especially young ones? Also, do the natives need to be protected from cicadas this year? If so, how?
Aha. All right. With the cicadas, basically, you just have to worry about the trees. And with that, it's a matter of the calipers of the trees and such. There's a great resource if you go to Morton Arboretum. They have a thing on cicadas right now. If you're concerned about a newly planted tree or a tree that's like probably 3-inch caliper or smaller that you may have put in the last couple of years. There's like a netting thing you can do to sort of protect younger plants from getting maybe overhit by them. I've also seen there's people place aluminum foil around the edges so that they don't climb up into the trees, but they start flying around anyways. And I don't know if that's useful or not. I'm gonna learn as well as everybody else. It's a new experience for me. 22 years ago, last time I did it, it was just a fascination for me, and now it's more of what's going to happen. What I do understand though is if you do want to plant a new tree this year, like if you want to get that little baby arborvitae, they probably, I mean the baby Amelanchier, they're probably not going to mess with that size of a shrub or a tree. It's usually when they're a certain size that they start hitting them. And it's more like those establishment trees. But don't take my word for it. Do the research. It's worth it if you have a plant that you want to protect. Yeah. Anything else?
Last question on the chat was, how do I remediate poor soil, clay, and debris?
How do you
Like remedy poor soil,
remedy?
clay.
Leaf mulch, leaf mulch, leaf mulch. One really good way to start breaking down clay a little bit. Here's the question: is the clay like a loamy clay? Like if you pick it up, does it still have a little bit of crumble in it, or if it has a little bit of moisture in it, and you're like squeezing it and squeezing it and it keeps going like it makes a ribbon, then you have some pretty heavy duty clay because there's no organic matter in it anymore. And what's probably happened is there's been some compaction over time, because clay soils are actually wonderful. They're full of nutrients, and these plants have evolved with them. So basically, a lot of these plants are sort of clay busters too. So they'll kind of get down in there. And if you give them some support by using some leaf mulch to just let that start settling in with the soil and the plants, the leaf mulch and the soils will work together to improve. The biggest piece is every season with these gardens, you don't have to clean them up. In fact, please don't, because that's where the insects get to live. They get to overwinter. I had a beautiful experience over by, there's a small park off of the Skokie line. And all of a sudden, there were all these buckeye butterflies. And these are native butterflies that overwinter in the leaf litter. And it was like an emergence moment. And there were like 15, 20 of these little buckeyes that were just flittering all about. They had just emerged from their winter area because that area had not been disturbed. And we're always blowing things out and doing all this stuff. And you can't imagine how many insects have been trying to leave their progeny behind so they can keep going. And these are the insects that feed the birds. When you have caterpillars, a chickadee needs to have like 480 caterpillars from any tree to bring up and send a brood of 4 of its babes out into the world. 480 a day, that's a lot, so they need to eat, and we need to let nourishment be available for them. So letting your leaves, and also when you do cut back, you can go in and cut back your garden in the spring a little bit. You want to leave different heights. You want to, because if there's a hole like in the stem, some bees actually will take up residence in there in the summer. Also, it nourishes the soil, so it also helps to break up it gives some tooth to sandy soils, and it helps to break up that real stickiness of the clay soils. So I hope that was helpful. All right, you guys, I think I'm gonna go eat dinner. How about you guys? Buy plants from the native plant sale. If you want to volunteer, please, you can contact myself, Julia Bunn at evanstonenvironment.org. If you want to be one of the volunteers, it's a 3-day fun fest of getting things organized so that when everybody comes to pick up their plants, they're all joyously happy because everything they want is in one place and they just take it home with them. And so, yeah, it's such a joy to serve this community, and I'm so grateful. Good night, everyone. And thanks for coming. And tell everybody to buy native plants. Bye.